My son blocked me from his own wedding and told me I wasn't family anymore. He had no idea what was already on its way to his phone. The morning of my son's wedding, I ironed my dress, pinned my hair the way he'd always liked it, and drove 40 minutes to the church carrying one thing: hope. Not excitement, the quiet, desperate hope a mother holds even when something inside her whispers that everything is wrong. I walked up the stone steps, white flowers everywhere, guests in their finest, music drifting through the open doors. Then my son stepped in front of me, blocked the entrance, and looked me dead in the eye. "You weren't invited, Mom." His voice didn't shake. "The family decided you're not one of us anymore." 40 minutes of driving, 40 years of being his mother. He said it like he was reading a parking ticket. I didn't scream, didn't beg, didn't fall apart in front of everyone who'd turned to stare. I just tightened my grip on my purse and said 7 words. "Okay, but check your phone later, sweetheart." Then I turned, walked back down the steps, got in my car, and drove home. What nobody in that church knew, not my son, not his new wife, not one guest in a press suit or pretty dress, was that I'd spent the last 8 months building something they never saw coming. I was never a dramatic woman. I didn't call twice a day or show up uninvited or turn holidays into battlegrounds. I packed school lunches, worked overnight at a records office, and came home at 6 a.m. to make my son breakfast before school. Quiet, steady, the kind of person the world tends to overlook, which turned out to be my greatest advantage. My husband Gerald was the same way, calm, disciplined, building things slowly. A small manufacturing business, some real estate, careful investments over 30 years. Nobody knew how much he'd accumulated because he never talked about it. We still drove old cars and lived in the same house we'd bought when our son Aaron was 3. Gerald got sick when Aaron was 32. It moved fast. In his final weeks, he called me to his bedside and gave me 2 things, a sealed envelope and specific instructions. "Catherine, what I've left behind is significant. Aaron doesn't know yet. Hold all of it until you're certain he's standing on solid ground, not just financially, emotionally. Make sure what I built doesn't go to someone who doesn't deserve it." I told him I would. 3 weeks after Gerald passed, I sat across from our attorney, Mr. Patterson, as he opened a file that stopped my breath. Gerald had left behind 3 manufacturing facilities, 2 commercial properties, an investment portfolio that had been quietly compounding for a decade, and a private bank account he'd never mentioned to anyone, not even me. All of it was under my control, legally. Aaron would be notified eventually, but nothing would transfer until I decided he was ready. Gerald had written that clause himself. I honored it exactly as he'd asked. I didn't change my life, didn't tell Aaron, didn't move, didn't buy anything. I went back to the same house, drove the same car, lived the same quiet life. And I waited. She arrived about 4 months after Gerald died. Aaron brought her to Sunday dinner, already unusual, since he hadn't come to Sunday dinner in 6 weeks. She was polished. Heels at a casual family meal, clothes that were expensive in a quiet, studied way. Her smile was warm, her eye contact was calibrated. But a quiet woman who spent decades watching people notices what polished people forget to hide. Stephanie never glanced at the family photos, never asked about Gerald, never looked at Aaron the way a woman looks at someone she loves. She looked at the house the way an appraiser looks at square footage. Within 20 minutes, she'd asked, sweetly, whether the house had been in the family long, whether the property extended past the fence, whether I'd ever considered downsizing now that it was just me. She wasn't making conversation. She was making calculations. I smiled, answered politely, refilled her water glass, and started paying close attention. It never happens in one dramatic moment. It happens in 100 small ones, each easy to explain away. First, Aaron's calls thinned out, twice a week, then once a week, then once a month, and shorter each time. Sunday dinners became sporadic, then stopped. Certain phrases started appearing in our conversations. Stephanie thinks. Stephanie feels like. Stephanie mentioned that. At first, it sounded normal. You factor in a partner, but the sentences kept shifting shape. Stephanie thinks you call too much. Stephanie feels like you don't respect our space. Stephanie mentioned that maybe you were never as supportive as you thought. I recognized what was happening. I'd read about it, seen it happen in other families. You never quite believe it will happen in yours. I found out about the engagement on social media. A photo, a ring, a caption reading that the most important people had been there. I was not one of the most important people. Then they came to my house together with a folder. Stephanie sat across from me at my own kitchen table and explained, warmly and reasonably, that they were starting their life together, and that the house, given its size and the fact that I was alone now, might suit them better as a family home. She'd drafted documents for me to sign. They'd make sure I was taken care of. Aaron sat beside her and said nothing, watching me the way someone watches a transaction close. I looked at my son, the boy who used to fall asleep on this kitchen floor with his toy trucks, and asked one question. "Hey, is this what you want, Aaron? Is this coming from you?" He glanced at Stephanie. He didn't answer. That was my answer. I told them I needed time to think, kept my voice even, offered them tea, and walked them to the door. The moment it closed, I called Mr. Patterson. Everything I did next, I did carefully, legally, and with full documentation. Mr. Patterson connected me with a financial investigator named Patricia, methodical and calm no matter what she uncovered. I did some digging of my own, too. A picture came into focus. Stephanie had a pattern. A previous long-term relationship with an older, wealthy man that had ended abruptly, a legal dispute over property, a quiet, sealed settlement, and a move to a new city. There was more. Financial records, accessed through proper channels, showed that since Stephanie and Aaron got serious, Aaron had taken out a significant personal loan. The funds moved into a joint account, opened, I confirmed, before they were officially engaged, that Stephanie controlled. I also had a recorded call with Aaron, made with his knowledge and consent, in which he made several statements about the property and the estate that were factually untrue in ways that mattered legally. By the time the wedding date arrived, I had a folder, a USB drive, and a conversation with Mr. Patterson that ended with him telling me, "Catherine, you are completely protected." What I sent to Aaron's phone at 3:10 p.m. just as the processional music started wasn't a threat. It was a single PDF from Mr. Patterson's office, containing 3 things: a full accounting of Gerald's estate that Aaron had never seen, a legal letter explaining that under Gerald's will, the estate transfer was permanently revoked due to documented coercion, financial manipulation, and misrepresentation, and a photograph of Stephanie at a notary's office 11 days earlier, signing Unt, or a name that wasn't the one she'd given Aaron. Her real name was different. Her history was different. Now Aaron knew. I heard what happened inside that church from Aaron himself. That same evening, he said Stephanie's name 3 times before he could form a sentence. The ceremony paused before it began. Aaron went pale, walked to the back of the church. Stephanie followed. Whatever happened in that hallway, I wasn't there to see. But it ended with Stephanie walking out through a side exit, into a car, and not coming back. Guests sat in the decorated pews for 45 minutes before Aaron came out and quietly told them there would be no ceremony. I don't take satisfaction in chaos. What I take satisfaction in is this. My son called that night, drove to my house, and sat at the same kitchen table where Stephanie had once asked me to sign away my home. He cried in a way I hadn't seen since he was a child. "Mom, I don't even know who she was." "I know," I said, putting my hand over his. "That's why I had to find out." We stayed at that table until nearly midnight. He told me everything. The pressure, the isolation, the slow, steady way she'd convinced him I was the problem, that my love was transactional, that leaving me behind was something he was doing for himself. He'd believed it, because that's what this kind of influence does. It doesn't feel like influence. It feels like clarity. He hadn't seen the truth. I had. Stephanie didn't simply disappear. She retained a lawyer and filed a claim against assets she believed she was owed, based on promises Aaron had made. She wasn't entitled to them. Mr. Patterson's documentation was thorough enough that her claim was dismissed before it reached trial. Her sealed prior legal history was entered into consideration through proper channels. She settled quietly and moved to another city. Aaron spent months working through what had happened. He started seeing a counselor. He called me more. Not every day, we're not those people, but regularly, honestly. Gerald's estate was eventually transferred to him in full under the original terms, which Mr. Patterson confirmed were still intact and sound. Aaron didn't use it the way Stephanie had planned. He took 6 months to learn the business, brought in people Gerald had trusted, and made considered decisions. Slowly, genuinely, he became the man Gerald had hoped he'd be. One afternoon, he sat across from me and asked about the sealed letter Gerald had left. I'd kept it for 3 years, read it once, then folded it into the back of a bedside drawer. I retrieved it and handed it to him. He read it in silence. When he finished, his eyes were full. Gerald had written, "If you're reading this, Aaron, then your mother did exactly what I asked. She protected you even when you didn't know you needed it, even when you pushed her away. She's the best person I've ever known. Please don't forget that." Aaron didn't speak for a long time. Then he said, "I won't forget again." I'm not telling this story to make myself the hero. I made mistakes, too. Moments I should have spoken up sooner, conversations I avoided because I didn't want to be difficult, times I mistook keeping the peace for actually having it. But here's what I know now. The quietest people in a room are often the ones who see the most clearly. Not because they're cold, but because they aren't performing. They're watching, listening, building something patient and real in the spaces louder people never think to check. Stephanie underestimated me because I didn't fight loudly. She saw my stillness and read it as weakness, an older woman alone in a house, easy to move aside. She saw the wrong thing entirely. If you're a mother watching someone slowly pull your child away from you, I won't tell you what to do. Every family's fractures are different, but I'll say this. Don't spend your energy convincing people of your worth. Spend it documenting it, protecting it, building quietly while others assume you've already lost. The truth doesn't need to be shouted to be powerful. Sometimes it just needs to arrive as a text message at exactly the right moment.